Kent, welcome, man. How are you doing?
Good, Carlos. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Man, well, first of all, for everyone that doesn't know him, Kent BARTON is the head of research and development at ShapeShift. And would you like to just quickly touch on what ShapeShift is for those that don't know it?
Yeah, ShapeShift is sort of really the way to make it easier to connect to the decentralized world of crypto. Historically, we've always been all about non-custodial transfer of crypto wealth, crypto assets. That was our bread and butter for several years. We didn't want to hold your funds because there's always a risk of that, exchanges getting hacked. And the real spirit of crypto is being your own bank, having complete autonomy and custody over what you're doing. So what we do now is rather than actually operating an exchange ourselves, we connect to a variety of dexes like 0x on the Ethereum side, and now we have Thorchain, and we let users plug in and really have the best UX and oftentimes the best rates for swapping these things. In addition, we're going to be adding other functionality over time. There's a lot going on with NFTs and everything in DeFi, whether it's lending and it really kind of the place you go to have the best user experience, really the easiest way to interact with this blossoming DeFi and crypto world.
Man, well, you mentioned NFTs, and I have to say, I was reading your article. Should I call it an article, or what should I call the PDF that you put out from ShapeShift side that you wrote on NFTs and the Metaverse and all this? And great work, man. I really liked it.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks for reading.
I thought I lost you, but yeah, that was the end of the sentence. And yeah, so I really wanted to talk NFTs with you, and we were talking about music of the recording, and in the document itself, you mentioned music a lot. You mentioned the applications of NFTs for artists, and I think it's just a great place to start here. Would you like to just quickly, because well, the document is called Welcome to the Metaverse. So would you like to explain what the Metaverse is?
Yeah, so this is kind of drawing on for you and all the readers out there who might be familiar with the cyberpunk genre. Is back in the day, in the late 80s, early 90s, there is this sense with cyberpunk authors like Neil Stephenson and William Gibson that wow, eventually the virtual world is going to sort of meld with the real world, and the virtual world itself will be this place where maybe there's no real world representation of things, people or objects, but yet it's real to us. We saw this in Ready Player One too. So the metaverse, and we also saw this very early on with things like persistent MMOs and World of Warcraft and games like that. People are always spending time online. And I think this trend even accelerated with the pandemic, even more so. People were just always living in the metaverse. So the metaverse is kind of like this world that only exists in virtual form. And eventually, I think it's going to be, just part of real life, where you're always, you have one foot in the real world and one foot in the virtual.
I think, Lex Friedman was touching this topic with Charles Hoskinson on their latest podcast episode. Did you have a chance to check that out? It made quite a bit of noise on the cryptosphere.
I just heard about that yesterday. I saw something that it was 5 hours long.
5 hours
there's
long.
a TLDR of it, but
it really shows you how much spare time some of us have.
Once you go down that crypto rabbit hole, it's hard to stop digesting information.
But by the way, dude, just before we go back to the metaverse, I wanted to ask you, what the hell is going down in Colorado that everyone's in Colorado all of a sudden?
You mean with respect to crypto?
Yeah, in the crypto scene, like the
So
Gitcoin's Kevin Owoki is there. I was talking to him the other day. You guys are there. Cardano's there. Well, like what's going on in Colorado?
So that's a great question, and I think I'm well positioned to answer that one.
Yes, you are.
So historically, Colorado has always had sort of like an independent spirit. This goes back to even the Wild West days. Colorado was a step removed from the main American government and society over on the East Coast, and over time, it really kind of maintained that spirit of wanting to do things our own way. For example, Colorado we were the first ones to legalize medical marijuana and even recreational marijuana. There's always
that's why you're all there.
Exactly. No, we did have a big influx of people come after we legalized. I think it really speaks to kind of the attitude that people have here. And then at the same time, in addition to that independent spirit, there's been a good tech scene here for a few decades in Denver and in Boulder, increasingly so. So you kind of combine all that, and so fast forward, to maybe the like 2012-ish, 2013. There was actually, even in the early days, there was a good Bitcoin group in Denver. People were getting interested in Bitcoin, pretty vibrant sort of thing going on. I started the Ethereum Denver meetup group a year later in 2014, and it just gradually took off because I think that people really could see the potential of this technology, which at the time seemed crazy and speculative. And also Zuko is from here with Zcash and Electric Coin Company. Of course, Kevin is rocking it up in Boulder. Yeah, Charles has been in Colorado. I'm not sure if he's a native. He's been around for quite some time. So it's kind of just this critical mass of people that could kind of see where things are headed. And Denver and Boulder in particular kind of have that a really good.
Could you try
a fertile environment.
Could you try and get the mic a bit closer to your face? Like,
sure thing.
Like good measures is like a hand away from your face.
Let's see here. Just bear with me here.
Yeah, no problem. I was thinking, I think Charles Hoskinson's from Montana or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, so and that's another, let me adjust the volume here. How does that sound, Carlos? Is that a little bit better of a signal?
Yeah, that's less breaky for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try to speak up too. Yeah, Montana is another. Just the American West in general has tended to have that more independent spirit of people really kind of doing their own things, not being so beholden to what what's going on the coasts. So it lends itself nicely to being on these new digital frontiers that we're building right now.
People are really friendly as well. I love the accent as well. I love the accent, and for me, my favorite Americans have always been from like the Midwest or from that area, Illinois. So, man, well, back to ShapeShift, back to NFTs. So we are talking about this world, this virtual world, virtual reality world, and it gets. This conversation can get this topic really fast, right? It can go full Ready Player One very fast. But NFTs, of course, play a great part in this, right? Because the more you merge virtual reality and actual reality, the more important things such as NFTs are. Is there any counter case for this? Is there any case where people think, okay, no, the metaverse is one thing, but NFTs do not play any part on this?
I think you could say that there is a role to be played for NFTs, even if you don't really subscribe to the idea that everything is going to wind up in a metaverse context. That is a little bit more sci-fi, even though there's early signs of it happening right now. But even if you set aside that metaverse aspect, there's all sorts of use cases for NFTs. I'll just list a few right now. So at the most basic level, we've seen this during the initial boom with NFTs of artists selling NFTs of their work. I bought an NFT from a really talented 17-year-old sci-fi artist down in India, in New Delhi. And the really cool thing about exchanges like that is now you can support artists without having to go through a middleman. And at the same time, you're getting what's essentially is like a certificate of authenticity that is impossible to, to fake, and also one that you could sell in the future if you wanted to, collect art in that fashion. And meanwhile, these artists, it's been, really revolutionary. People were kind of like taken aback by this boom in NFTs. And I think they were kind of thinking, well, it's obviously a bubble, this is just a fad. And of course, yeah, I mean, price wise, I think, it's a bubble. And initially, the initial hype will kind of die down. But at the core, there's such a powerful thing here: the ability for creators to connect with their fans and just earn crypto funds directly by selling them something that gives the owner, right to like digital scarcity, like this is mine. And I think that trend is only going to accelerate. Another example that I touched on in that report is like real estate. This is something that it's hard to imagine a more traditional or real world asset, something it's almost like the opposite of the metaverse. This is, what's more real than real estate?
Nothing is more mid space than a house.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost the definition of meat space. And when you think about that, it's like, okay, it's very tried and true, but there's a lot of ways to improve that experience. The one I touched on in the report is being able to have fractional ownership of NFTs or of real estate NFTs, where, typically if you wanted to invest in maybe, let's say there's some $5 million beach house and I want to like the long run, like, unless you have a lot of money, you couldn't do that. But imagine, getting together with 50 or 500 other people and just getting fractional ownership of that, because the ownership is actually tokenized as an NFT. There's some interesting projects working on this in the earlier stages. So even if you set aside those virtual elements, okay, you're in VR, you're in the metaverse, something like that, there's still a lot of use cases. One final one I would say is going back to the music stuff is, music labels, their purpose, now that there's Spotify out there and, the music world has really changed, where labels previously were very extractionary. They would charge musicians a big cut, or maybe they would front them some money, then they take a giant cut of their earnings for putting their music out. Now anybody can put their music out, and as long as you have the discovery, that's fine. But how do you sell your music, or even your rights? So now with NFTs, use case, but common is, let's say I write a song and you dig it. You think, well, actually, this song really has maybe commercial potential. You could buy not just the, kind of the NFT of the song, but we could structure it so like the intellectual property and the royalties, the streaming royalties, are actually part of that NFT. As it merges with these NFTs, as you get some sort of guarantees of things like royalties, that's another way where you can really commoditize things like royalties, and in the end, it's a big win for creators because it's just another way to connect and make money.
And see, this is something that I was thinking on my way here, because I also play music as a side gig and for fun and everything. And you would really hear from people, like not even the top artists in the world, like the days where the Beatles could just not tour and live off royalties, those days are pretty much over. Like Spotify doesn't pay you that much for streaming. YouTube also is not the source of income that it could be for artists, for musicians, and no one would even try and make a case that it makes sense to try and sell your music digitally, right? Like we all saw how that went down in like the early 2000s. So
Yep.
it looks like that sort of revenue stream is pretty much gone. And now with NFTs, there's a way to make it easier. And I'm not going to go and defend Metallica here. Like if anyone remembers that whole scandal back in the day.
Napster, yeah.
yeah. I'm not gonna go and try and defend them, but for the little guy, it makes sense that there is now a way to sell your music, but also to have a way to make the sale itself be a representation of your community and your following. And that is something that you touch on the report, right? This concept that if there is a finite number of NFTs, then a community member or a fan is really showing their support and getting something back from showing their support by purchasing, right?
Right. Yeah. And another example you just reminded me of along these lines is, you're talking about just how music has changed, and really a lot of more established or even up and coming bands and artists and DJs will rely on touring, assuming there's no pandemic, that's been at least a potentially reliable way to make money. Even that has tie-ins with NFTs. I have a friend who's a huge Grizz fan, like the electronica musician Grizz. And what Grizz did is put out NFTs related to shows. So there is one NFT, and I think it may have been around a song and maybe an associated piece of artwork. But the really cool thing about this NFT is it also provided the owner with the ability to, I think, like attend any given show anytime. It's like an all access pass, and being able to get really clever with these things. But then also, hypothetically, you could do that before NFTs, but now, like, hypothetically, the owner of this NFT, maybe eventually they're like, okay, I'm really maxed out on Grizz. Maybe I got enough enjoyment out of this. Maybe they want to transfer it to somebody else on the secondary market. So maybe there's an even bigger Grizz fan that would want to purchase that. So it introduces market dynamics into this. It introduces the ability to have secondary markets. And I think we've only just scratched the surface of what's possible with this kind of thing.
Speaking about dystopias, I'm getting a very fun thought arising here. It could even give you like a way to quantify and to measure cancel culture. Like if your favorite artist is selling like NFTs or of all his work, if the minute he or she gets into a scandal or does something that would get them like canceled on Twitter, then you would actually have a physical, well, not a physical, but you would even have a chart like detailing how much value their career lost through this.
That's a really good point. And yeah, with cancel culture, just the idea of canceling and censoring things, in the crypto context, that's pretty uncrypto. Of course, people can do whatever they want, but it also might reveal that, even though the media really hypes up these incidents where things are canceled or people are canceled, in the end, this could also reveal that maybe that attention actually makes an artist's properties or creations go up because there's more attention. And the media, of course, would never, that doesn't make a great story. The media loves to hype stuff up. So, and again, it really goes back to this idea of empowering artists. And also, imagine if something is canceled, okay, or maybe, maybe your Instagram got canceled because when you were 17, you said something controversial or something. Crypto at the core, as you're well aware, is if done right, like if it's properly decentralized, a network like Ethereum, it's unstoppable. It's censorship resistant. So something like that is a perfect antidote to this, this culture of self-righteous cancellation of anything people don't agree with.
Right, and that's that also reflects on the whole thing of judge the artist, not the art, because if you do this right, like you say, the art would live forever, right? It would be on the blockchain, it would be uncancelable. The person or the value associated with the person would could go down, could go up, but the art itself, it would live forever, and that's a beautiful thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, we're a bit away from the virtual reality thing, but I think we got into a very interesting space, because I was also reading your thoughts on Medium, and this is an old article, but I remember reading it back in the day, about tribalism in the crypto scene. And well, I think this is a topic that, if anything, has gotten bigger. I think that, if anything, we've gotten more and more tribal with our communities in crypto. So I'm just going to send to a quick message from a sponsor. And meanwhile, people can just drop down their craziest ideas for the applications of NFTs. And in the comments, they can like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll come right back to this. The Blockchain People podcast is brought to you by Coin Payments, the world's first and leading crypto payment processor. Coin Payments serves over 70,000 merchants in over 200 nations with industry-low fees since 2013. The Coin Payments wallet lets users hold over 2,000 different cryptocurrencies, which is why they're used by giants such as NordVPN and Binance. Whether you're a merchant or an individual looking to get paid in crypto, Coin Payments could be just what you need. Okay, man. So yeah, can you tell us more about how you've, if you have any new thoughts about this tribalism issue that goes down in crypto?
Yeah. So if anybody wants to read this article on Medium, it's just type in crypto tribalism in my name, Kent Barton. It's called Divided We Fail. And I wrote this in 2018. I think it was like early 2018, kind of as we were coming out of the last bull market. And even back then, you started to see tribalism. Primarily, it was like, Bitcoin maximalists, essentially. And you had some other projects like EOS, or we're going to go after ETH, we're ETH killers, things like that. But fast forward to today, I think, as you said, this is more relevant than ever. The stakes have grown as more money's come into the ecosystem, and so has just the chest pounding and the absurd tribalism. So, yeah, this is ridiculous for a few reasons. I mean, first and foremost, we're all on the same. I'm not sure if I can freely curse here. We're all on the same fucking team. Feel free to edit that out. But I feel very strongly.
You can curse everything you want.
Fuck yes. All right. So we're on the same fucking team. These pinche tribalists, man. Like, so I think the roots of this, you can go back to the scaling debate that Bitcoin had, the block size debate. And Bitcoin back in the day, people aren't aware of this or may have forgotten this. It was a great place to be. You could go to the Bitcoin subreddit. People were very welcoming. There wasn't this attitude of like, oh, screw everything else. It was more just thing. I feel like that kind of changed when the block size wars happened. And then, in the lead up to the fork with Bitcoin Cash, people got very like defensive and like, kind of split along these lines. And then at the same time, Ethereum started to become more of a thing. So you kind of have this like incredibly narrow, rigid view, like that the only use case for crypto is sound money. And granted, that's a wonderful use case for crypto, especially when central banks, whether it's in Argentina or in the US, are just inflating the shit out of their cryptocurrency or out of their fiat currency.
Soon to be cryptocurrency as well. I'm looking at you, China.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect example. So you have, the 21 million limit of Bitcoin. That's wonderful, but there's this kind of very ideologically rigid idea that that's it, and everything either is that sound money. It has to be somehow built on Bitcoin, or else it's a scam. And objectively, this has been completely false. Like Ethereum generates more fees for its miners per day and has way more going on. Everybody from like Visa to grassroots projects to the European Central Bank issuing bonds on Ethereum. I mean, this is really a thing, but these maximalists have their head in the sand. And this is nothing new. It's annoying, and it does a disservice to the cause of freedom, I think, because it misleads people. At the same time, starting about 2 years ago, you had people in Ethereum starting to push back and be like, these maximalists are really hostile, and they're full of they're spewing misconceptions, and they're just wrong about everything. So there's kind of a pushback amongst people in the space, some people to really call them out. And that was actually positive. But at the same time, you've kind of seen shades of like, well, maybe it's only Ethereum is the only good one. And that's less common for sure. But it's something that we always have to be on guard against. And then, you have this idea of like, well, what about other blockchains? Are they sufficiently decentralized? But when you combine some of these ideological kind of deep-seated beliefs with money, with everybody wants to pump their own bags and wants their investments to go up, it just gets quite nasty. But in the meantime, the real enemy is the powers that be that we're trying to disintermediate. The governments that inflate money so they can build more bombs to drop on innocent people, or do all sorts of other awful things that nation states do. This is the true this is the true force that we want to disintermediate. And
just to add to that, the forces that we're trying to disintermediate are also like the financial institutions that charge Africans 85% interest on a loan of $100 just because they're poor and they're not sure that they will get it. They're the people that are, financing war, doing deals with drug cartels. Like, yeah, you're right. Like the Bitcoin community, if you're an Ethereum, is not the enemy, and even the BCH or the BSV community is not the enemy. Like they're different shades of sort of the same thing. And I think Vitalik put it really well when he said that having the tribalism in crypto was like having the PC versus Mac wars again, just if every computer had some company stuck inside of it.
Yeah, that was a perfect analogy, because it just is so fitting for what's going on. And what? Another thing is like you start to see like people call themselves very principled. You see, historically, Bitcoiners have been very libertarian, and they don't want the state intervening with things. But then, you've seen various instances of, these so-called freedom maximalists, people that really value liberty, coming out and sort of, saying, well, Ethereum should have been a security, and they should regulate stable coins. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought you were principled. So you kind of see over time, there are people that really truly do care about these things, and then there's people that are more so just waving that ideological flag, or wanting their investments to go up. I think a perfect example of being really consistent with values is Zuko with Zcash. The reason I mention that is it was very striking to me to see somebody who was very committed to the idea of preserving privacy, and then Zcash was built around that idea. However, once Ethereum started to get the ability to add in privacy preserving tech via maybe hooks into Zcash or using that technology, Zuko and a lot of that team was 100% behind that. So rather than just say, well, wait, that's not built in our ecosystem, we can't handle that. It's like, okay, this actually pushes progress forward with respect to privacy. Therefore, that's great. And I wish a lot more actors in the ecosystem were like that. People in the Monero space, some of them are actually quite the opposite, where they just shit all over Zcash and anything that's not Monero. And it's like, wait a minute, you're really on the same team here. You want to preserve financial privacy. Maybe you don't. Maybe you think the methods aren't great, but again, it's just that there's a certain kind of person that's drawn to the tribalism, and it gets amplified on Twitter, and it's tiring, it's bullshit, and it ultimately, I think it just does a disservice to the progress of crypto.
And it does so much, because in the end of the day, the more you think about it, the more correlated we all are. Like, if one thing happens on one side of the blockchain sphere, particularly in Bitcoin, of course, because it's just like the way things are currently, it ripples through to everything that we do. And there was a very interesting thing that happened back in the Ethereum classic days, like in the, or rather the DAO hack days, where this thing occasioned the creation of Ethereum Classic and the division, and you could see sort of like the more libertarian Bitcoin maximalist types flocking towards ETC and ETH, like remaining this separate thing that some would call a shitcoin just because it had a pre-mine, because it had an ICO, etc. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you see any way to reasoning with these communities, particularly in Ethereum's case, or is it just a lost case that is we can never convince like Bitcoin maximalists that Ethereum's good for the space?
I mean, certain Bitcoin maxis are, you know, there's sort of maybe a lost cause, although you have seen people kind of go from a more rigid Bitcoin stance to becoming more open-minded.
Sailor Eric from ShapeShift is a great example, right? He was a bit of a maximalist back in the day.
Sure. Yeah, he was, you know, back when there was really kind of only Bitcoin and, you know, a few other ones. Maybe Litecoin was very early on. Yeah, he kind of thought, okay, well, Bitcoin is the only game in town. But I think once he saw value in some other coins like Litecoin, and then of course with Ethereum, it's like if you just rationally look at it and you don't take that tribalist perspective, you can see that other projects can add value as well, and suddenly you're not such a maximalist. I think one thing, because you ask a really good question, is like, what can be done about this? I think so. When I talk about the evils of tribalism, I'm not saying that there's not room for healthy debate around things. Like there are like very good arguments for and against, you know, different implementations of this type of technology, and we're all just making this up as we go along. So it's very important to have open discourse and open debates, but part of it is just like, let's be cool to each other. Like, you know, you see some of these people, they get so they're so aggressive and so just like, you know, the cliche is toxic, but they are, and I think that really sells online. Some people love that stuff, like, oh, like he's such a toxic dick, you know, like, and people are drawn to that, some people, but it's like, what if we all just kind of took the approach of like, I would say a lot of these maximalists, if they were sitting in a bar with you, they would have a nice rational conversation. It really helps them sell their brand by being toxic online. But part of it is just to have like rational, nice debates about things. This is one thing where Ethereum has been really good, is over the course of the Ethereum journey, there's been a lot of you know, interesting debates and discussions about how to handle all variety of things, whether it was, you know, going back to the DAO hack or the parity multi-sig hack, or like the merits of 1559 and things like that. But people, for the most part, have always been really just kind of very academic and very and not so emotional with debates. And I think communities should approach each other in that way. Also just pulling back and zooming out and seeing the big picture, and also recognizing that increasingly blockchains do not live on an island of their own. There's more and more bridges being built in a increasingly trust minimized fashion from one blockchain to another. Thorchain is a perfect example. You know, now users can go to ShapeShift and use Thorchain to move from, say, you know, Bitcoin to ETH, or, you know, from two different chains without having to rely on a centralized third party. And that's a huge win. Cosmos is another example. You can do some interesting things in Cosmos on these zones because they're more scalable and they have faster finality. But now with the advent of the Gravity bridge over to ETH, you can actually have, you know, you can kind of have the best of both worlds. Just really quick, I want to give one example of that. There's an app called Salmonier. Zaki and Jack Zamplin, two guys in the Cosmos ecosystem, have built this. And it's a way where you can manage impermanent loss on Uniswap. But to make that happen, you're utilizing the benefits of Cosmos's scalability and fast finality. So we're just starting to see like how these building blocks can plug into each other. And I'm a very, very firm believer that the crypto over the long run is not a zero sum game, but a positive sum game. And that zero sum fallacy, once you just, look at where things are headed and you cast that aside, you start to see the big picture.
I'm very interested in the way tribalism gets sort of injected into the ecosystem, because, for example, I know I bring this up a lot, and this goes more for my friends watching this than to the people watching this. I try to keep this thinking away from the channel, but I have a love-hate relationship with Cardano and with Charles Hoskinson himself, not because I don't think they're doing good things, not because I think he's not a great member of the ecosystem, but just because every time he gets a chance, his selling point is to compare Cardano to Ethereum. And I'm sure because they have a very academic approach to doing things, and they're very scientific, and they really like honest, open, constructive debate. But every time he gets just talking about Ethereum and how they're different or better than Ethereum, because that's pretty much most of what they do, talk about how they're better than Ethereum in the way they perceive things. I honestly think even if you're doing it in a good way or in a positive way, there is no way that doesn't that doesn't filter down the ecosystem and become tribalism down the line. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when platforms position themselves as ETH killers, that does them a big disservice. We saw an interesting contrast to that with Cosmos. I think is like, Cosmos is just in terms of like on a per zone basis is far more scalable than Ethereum layer 1, and there's also this idea of connecting these different blockchains, and that's interesting. But there is never that kind of hyperbolic vitriol against Ethereum. There's never this like, we're here to eat their lunch. And that makes a big difference because you really push people away. You make people on guard against that technology. With Cardano, I think, a lot of it goes back probably with the history of Charles, who used to be with the EF in the very early days. And, there's just all of that. I haven't really listened to much Cardano stuff lately. I do know that they, a lot of people, a lot of advocates of ADA and Cardano, pushing the investment on Twitter, love to, kind of perpetuate this. You're really seeing this now with Solana. They're trying to position themselves and shift the narrative into this idea of like, well, maybe a little bit of centralization is okay to meet the needs of like, the scalable crypto world. But, at the end of the day, it's like, on one hand, I think it's telling that everybody wants to compare themselves with Ethereum. That really is where most of the action is happening now. And, people in other platforms, they have this idea that maybe we could be the one that really kind of takes over. Again, I think that's short-sighted. Everything can work together. Decentralization is a sliding scale. Not everything needs to be super centralized. So, maybe there is a use case for things that aren't as decentralized. With respect to Cardano, these comparisons seem kind of silly to me because, their smart contract functionality isn't live yet. People will call them vaporware.
Yeah, like I saw the vaporware. Sorry, I saw the vaporware thing in your article. I thought it was very funny. I never seen that.
Yeah, people like to say, well, what's been delivered. But the fact is they're doing some interesting things from a UTXO kind of paradigm, and I think it really is good, like the academic rigor that they apply there. But on the same token, pardon the pun, it just doesn't do you any favors to just always position yourself in such an antithetical way. Like these things will be able to plug in with each other, and the sooner we can just get away from that tribalist thinking, the more we can really see the big picture and start to figure out how these various technologies can meet the needs of the entire world, which will eventually be adopting crypto.
And that's sort of like if, I don't know, Samsung Okay, I'm gonna go to an easier example. It's sort of like if Pepsi positioned itself as a Coca-Cola killer. Like it really tells you a lot, right?
Exactly. It's like you're just, aiming for that top brand or whatever. The good thing is, like, I feel like in Ethereum, that's been these criticisms have really sort of lit a fire under the asses of all the builders. Like, for example, with layer 2 and down the road eventually with the sharding paradigm. But like one of the best things you can do when you see these criticisms is just sit back and be like, okay, how much validity is there? One thing a lot of people will do, especially online, is make overly broad statements. You've seen this with Bitcoiners, for example. They'll say Ethereum can't scale. Ethereum can't scale. It's like, okay, if you don't really know the space, you might see that transactions were costing, $100 or something crazy. And yes, Ethereum layer 1 certainly is not a scalable blockchain, but that completely overlooks the meaningful progress and adoption that's been happening with layer 2 chains. On the slightly more centralized side, you have like Polygon with a side chain, but then you have really trust minimized rollups getting built in, and these things are really delivering on those promises. So anytime anybody makes a claim or a statement, it's always good just to pull back from your own biases and just objectively look at it and say, okay, is this actually the case?
I'm curious about your thoughts merging together this thing with the competition between blockchains and what's more centralized than what and everything about Tezos, because the way the NFT marketplace
Tezos,
competition...
I haven't been following too.
Sorry, yeah, go.
Sorry, you're asking about Tezos and then kind of in the context of NFTs?
Yeah, because I just thought like the Hicket marketplace, it was a really great solution to a problem that was happening precisely with the Ethereum fees. And you mentioned this in your report. You cannot have scalability in NFTs with big fees, even if sellers or marketplaces are taking the fees. It's just like not feasible. It's just not something that can scale. Again, going back to can scale things. And Tezos was a great solution for that particular use case. The Hicket marketplace was great. It was beautiful. The guys developed it pretty quickly, and the governance token launch was, I think, pretty much on point. So yeah, I was wondering what your thoughts were on Tezos, and in this context and in every other context that you want to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that Tezos has found a bit of a product market fit with NFTs, because before it's like, they were first to the staking game, or at least in a more nuanced kind of way. They were really first to POS in terms of viable tech. There wasn't really much going on there, very much a zombie chain. With NFTs, there seems to be some use of NFTs on that chain just for that reason, that they're cheaper. The one thing I would be wary of in terms of further adoption, expecting more adoption, is like Tezos is very much on its own island, and network effects are a very powerful thing. I'm not sure what plans they have with respect to bridges, but I would suspect effects, Ethereum-based chains over time will kind of provide that scalable layer, more so than just separate chains. And a perfect example is like with rollups, is like ZK rollups. These are trust minimized, scalable layers that are secured by essentially really fancy math. They've already been employed in a variety of contexts, like Gitcoin is using ZK Sync. And then there's Starkware. These guys down in Israel are killing it with DYDX, Diversify, and now they're using, and this is where it gets really interesting, but Immutable is a gaming NFT platform. And of course, gaming NFTs, this is something where you really want a lot of scalability, because you might have NFT in a game for every crazy weapon or maybe different characters or skins. You need scalability. And this is actually being provided in a ZK rollup context. The important thing, though, is in that paradigm, it's able to enjoy the network effects that are present elsewhere in the Ethereum space. So, you already have DeFi, you have a lot of NFT stuff going on. So to kind of wrap it back up and answer your question, I would say, what Tezos is doing with NFTs, or maybe NFTs on other blockchains like Near, clearly, like, there's a demand for cheaper NFTs, but I would suspect that those will become less prevalent over time, unless they can find a really trust minimized way to move back to Ethereum, which is where the action is. You can think of Ethereum as Manhattan, and maybe Tezos is kind of like a distant suburb that's much cheaper, but is it really where the action is? It's not. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out over time.
Are you familiar with what they call the star system? This is for investing, but I think it illustrates this point very well.
I'm not.
Okay, so basically the star system is like a very old-fashioned methodology for investing that's, some argue it's still applicable today. And it basically says that either that there are only two variables that you should look at, and this is not financial advice, guys, that there are only two variables that you should look at when thinking about investing, and that's how fast the market is growing and how your company is positioned, or a given company is positioned in this chart. Let's say one is the X variable and the other one is the Y variable. And if you're only looking at these two things, of course, the ideal thing to invest at is the leading company in a very fast-growing market. And the rationale behind that is that even if you have competitors that are, let's say, and bringing it back to blockchains, scaling faster, or they're just doing exciting new things and they're driving a lot of hype and everything, the leading company, or blockchain in this case, is also very much well positioned to take the best out of whatever it is you're doing and just do it 10 times better, or just in a more corporate context, acquire whoever is like their biggest challenger. And like you said, that sort of drives the point. The place where all the action is can very quickly adapt or create a better version of what it is that they're doing at, in this case, Tezos.
Right. Yeah. It kind of really gets back to that idea of network effects, and then you get these wonderful growth curves, where you have super linear growth, and you kind of hit that inflection point. I think the only nuance to add on top of that would be, in crypto, the total addressable market, when you think about like just the potential of this, I view it as essentially, eventually it's like most of the human population. Like, we're talking about changing the way finance works. We're talking about changing the way that humans interact with each other and govern organizations that they build. We're seeing this with DAOs, and that when you think about just like the insane number of use cases, I think there's room for multiple things to succeed if they're purpose built, for different types of functionality. I know with Cardano, they purport to be built on, they're using formal verification. They're building on functional programming that ostensibly should be a lot more secure. So maybe, there's a use case for like building certain types of banking applications on that. But the other thing is, it's easy to, for a very open-ended ecosystem like Ethereum, to adopt certain kinds of best practices. So even though, like, to use this one example, you couldn't easily build like functional programming in the Ethereum context with the EVM or eventually EWASM. What you can do is really, and we've seen this over and over, the need for like really thoroughly audited code over time. Those types of things become more ingrained in just encoding best practices, and you can kind of borrow certain elements of like, what if it's like code security, and apply that to these smart contracts. So over time, the ecosystem becomes people build in more functionality, but it also becomes more anti-fragile, to use a favorite term of Bitcoiners, because, things break and then they're fixed. And over time, people really learn from those mistakes. There will never be another reentrancy bug in Ethereum, because, the DAO sort of showed everybody the threat of that one. And, over time, there's other things that happen and things are fixed and it becomes stronger. But yeah, I think the overall market is huge, and there's many use cases out there waiting to be explored.
Are Bitcoiners still saying anti-fragile? Because now Nicholas Taleb went the full destroy Bitcoin mode, and yeah, I don't think they're liking these ideas as much as they did before.
Oh, are you thinking that the anti-fragile meme is a little less appealing in the current environment?
I think, well, so this guy that came up with the word anti-fragile, he's just now went full Bitcoin.
Oh, well, yeah.
Should be
Taleb,
worth zero. Yeah. So Taleb is now like what did they call him? A hate coiner? So now he's a hate coiner. So he's pretty much canceled in the Bitcoin community. So I'm not sure if and that's the meme, right? Nassim Taleb should write anti-fragile. Nassim Taleb, if you're listening to this, which I don't think you're doing, come to this podcast. I love you. Okay, so back to away from upsetting the Bitcoin community more than we already did. I wanted to ask you about ShapeShift itself. We haven't really touched a lot on ShapeShift, and there is a question from one of our viewers that I promised that I would read to you. So it goes like this: in his recent interview with Anthony Pompliano, Eric Burgess, CEO of ShapeShift, mentioned that the platform is looking into potentially offering lending borrowing products. Part of your ethos is to minimize counterparty risk. And therefore, do you think you'd be able to offer products that can continue to honor that part of your company's ethos?
So yeah, I can't go into like too granular details about our plans with respect to this, but I will say that, ShapeShift itself offering a product, one of the most important things that we've done over the past year is get away from the KYC, know your customer, and AML regulations that we had to adopt in 2018. That killed such a big portion of our business, because, our bread and butter was just this ability to have non-custodial exchanges. And we never want to be in a position to take custody of users' information or funds. So, the thought of having like a lending platform that we built, maybe in a decentralized context, things would play out differently. But the more interesting trend here, and I think where things are headed, is the fact that there's already plenty of existing functionality out there with, the Aabes of the world and Compound, and, it's really interesting things. And now you have interesting ways to, take out loans. You have liquidity, the collateralization terms are getting better as people experiment with different ways to go about this. So there are a lot of interesting things potentially to plug into. And ShapeShift traditionally has been very good at easing frictions and minimizing the different things that are a hassle with this, all while giving you the ability to continue to custody your own funds. So over time, lending is just going to get bigger, and ShapeShift will have I think an important role to play in terms of giving people those abilities.
I mean, non-custodial is just the way I reckon things ought to be. That, like you said in the beginning of the interview, non-custodial is the way crypto was supposed to be. The ethos was be your own bank. And I also think that when we're talking, and it ties back again to what you said before, like you had to respect people that follow the same ideas and take them to their greater extent, because now that we're talking about yields and DeFi and lending and all this, you saw Mark Cuban earlier this week, right? Like defending the right of DeFi to exist on its own with no regulation. But the minute they touch his own money, then then the government needs to get involved. And for a bit of additional context, the KYC thing for ShapeShift wasn't a small deal, right? Didn't you guys lose something like 95% of your users because of this?
Yeah, it was really a double whammy because we hit the bull market or the bear market, which retail volume kind of dried up across the board. But then on top of that, this value proposition that we had of not collecting users' information and having that had to go out the door because we have to play by the rules. So that really played such an important role and eventually. It was not a good fit for what we try to do. We want to be a very crypto forward company and really promote those values and also use those fundamental abilities to protect people against things like information hacks, which we see over and over, people's data getting hacked. So the ability to cast aside KYC AML and say, okay, we're not going to run our own exchange because there's this wonderful functionality already exists. Like I think Uniswap is one of the most important technological innovations, and the idea of AMMs in general in the past 20 years. It's like maybe 50 years. Maybe that sounds hyperbolic, but it is mind-blowing what's possible. And the thing that regulators aren't understanding yet, and I hope they do, there's just this misperception of like, oh, it's all tons of risk. Like it's actually, it's so transparent. And because everything is happening with the DEX on the blockchain, you can see where the money is. You can see how the code will execute. There aren't hidden risks like there were in 2008 with the financial meltdown when you had these collateralized debt obligations and things were very complex and hidden, and the whole system, almost blew up. It kind of did blow up because of it. DeFi offers a different way. It's like regulators can't directly control it, but on the other hand, if their true objective is to protect investors,
I don't know, man. Anything you'd like to say to Mark Cuban in this context?
I'm sure it'd be cool if Mark is on your show at some point. I think it's been remarkable to see somebody that is well respected in the business world and in pop culture truly get it. And his enthusiasm for DeFi has been so fun to see. And I think I really hope that it gets other people excited, even people that actually have some clout in terms of how this technology will be treated at the regulatory level and the institutional level. On the other hand, he kind of came out saying that, well, these things need to be regulated after this Titan hack. But I think what I would tell him is that, these are experiments. Titan was delivering a very high, I think it was delivering like 1.4% interest per day to its users. And, this is just kind of like caveat emptor, buyer beware. Like, of course, there's these grand experiments, but the very notion of DeFi is permissionlessness. Anybody across the world, you used the example earlier of like people, having to pay for, 80% interest to get a loan in, maybe Africa, things like that. Like this has no world is going to sue. And to say that, well, we should say that some stable coins are okay and some aren't. Who's making those decisions? Also, it's like, by its nature, this stuff is really hard to stop. This is built on unstoppable code. So instead of just falling back on the usual like, oh, Mr. Regulator, please help me, please protect me from these. I think there needs to be more a culture of people being aware of the potential risks, but also like really embracing like, okay, like which one of these are actually working as they intend. When you think about, to go back to the anti-fragile thing or like the Lindy effect, things like Uniswap and Curve and Compound, they've been protecting billions in value for many months and more. These are very anti-fragile things that they've, of course, you can't use them to generate insane profits or interest like with something like Titan, but it's like, it's a different risk reward, and these are things that are here to stay. And calling for regulators to save the day, we really run the risk of strangling the cradle or the baby in the cradle before it really has a chance to really thrive. And ultimately, I think it will protect investors.
And I reckon that we also need to start getting a culture of DeFi insurance, because we've had people that offer DeFi insurance here in the podcast before. You can see, we even did a walkthrough with the Robert Forster from Armor on how his platform works. Well, their platform. And we had Michael Beck of Union. He's coming back, actually. Well, big favorite of listeners. And they talk about the importance of having insurance in DeFi, and also about the fact that it's programmable. Like, you don't need to do that horrible thing that you do if you want to insure a car or something, that you have to call an agent and you have to report an accident if it happens, and it's just like a horrible process altogether where you have to sign papers and everything. No, but to insure your DeFi investment nowadays, you just click a button, connect to your MetaMask, and pay a little fee, and you're insured that if something is to happen. I mean, that's also a thing that we culturally need to be more aware of, don't you think?
That's an excellent point, Carlos, because and this is something that's easy to overlook, because DeFi insurance didn't really exist until like maybe a year ago. I did a report on this as well, on decentralized insurance. My favorite project in the space is Nexus Mutual, because they are so buttoned down, methodical, professional, and crucially, all their obligations are fully backed by the amount of tokens they have. And this is, of course, verifiable on chain. This isn't some crazy claim. You don't have to trust Nexus Mutual when they say they have sufficient backing. You can look at their wallet and be like, yes, they certainly are sufficiently backed. And this is, I think, over time, this is something that will also serve to protect investors, and also just the way that markets grow up around technology like this. It really stands to reason that the cost of insurance will be reduced over time, just as more people get into these platforms, and also the means by which they can be insured will become much easier. Like, imagine you're just you enter into a position on a platform, and maybe a little option opens up, and it's really easy to do, easy to manage. Yearn is already, I think, doing this. They've integrated some insurance solutions, and the things the tried and true things that work well to manage risk in the real world, like just being smart about managing risk and being aware of don't fall for the high yielding thing, thinking that it's not going to have a bad day. And also things like insurance really over time will help the market mature.
And you mentioned Nexus, and since I mentioned Armor before, I would just like to say, for those that haven't viewed that episode, Armor is based on Nexus. So Nexus also gives, and well, we have these meme money Legos, right? And you can do Legos with everything. You can do Legos with insurance. You can do Legos with protocols like Uniswap. Basically, the beauty of DeFi is that everything is interoperable, or it should be interoperable. And that if you don't like the way that one person did one thing, you can do it your way and add your stuff on top of them or replace some parts of them, and that's the way we grow, man. So what else are you researching these days? Since, well, your research and development, we've talked about development. What else is in the research part of things?
So something I recently delved into internally at ShapeShift was just looking at bridges. So I mentioned this earlier, but interoperability, this is going to be an increasingly important part of the DeFi, the blockchain ecosystem, things working with one another. So, with respect to like the layer 2 technologies like rollups, one of the maybe disadvantages with having these, these roll-ups, these different platforms, is they kind of exist in their own world, and you lose that composability and interoperability. You lose that ability to have money Legos. So it's important to find ways to preserve that. There's some interesting bridges that are being employed or being built to that hypothetically could connect Legos more. There's Hop Protocol. They're using a really interesting take on automated market makers and some tokenized incentives to do this. There's also Connext, which is using state channels, which is kind of like an old school. It was like the OG layer 2 solution. Back before roll-ups and Plasma, it was all about state channels. Of course, state channels are also being used in Lightning Network as for payment channels. They're kind of limited in terms of like building dApps on them, but it turns out that they're actually not bad for potentially bridging different environments and ecosystems. And then you have like bridges from one blockchain to another. I mentioned the Gravity bridge from Cosmos. That's a really interesting way, and I think a fairly trust minimized way to bridge those two worlds. You have Cosmos validators who are kind of incentivized to watch what's happening over on Ethereum, and there's some clever mechanisms there. I know Near Protocol has their Rainbow Bridge, but over time you're going to see these things get built out and improve both the UX and ideally, like improve kind of the composability, especially between different layer 2s on ETH. So that's been an exciting field to get into. And again, it's just everything is very new in terms of these bridges. I think in a quarter or two, there'll be some clear winners or use cases for these types of technology being used.
This could be a bit of a dumb question, but I've always thought about, I don't claim to know everything anyways. I always thought about Polkadot, sort of like an interoperability solution. Well, that's sort of what they are, right? But why are they not considered in this case? Why are they different to the solutions that they propose, that you mentioned?
Polkadot, I think they have plans to build bridges to other blockchains, but none of those are really active yet. So eventually Polkadot might have its own version of, what Cosmos has with the Gravity Bridge. I don't think that's really happening yet. Cosmos, or Polkadot has this unique approach with these various, with its high level architecture with these various chains. I think it's kind of early on to say. I think the jury is still out whether or not this can be like a vibrant ecosystem over time. But props to them for trying different things. This is their approach to scalability is very different from Cosmos or Ethereum. There's actually I did a report on this already, also about Near, Cosmos, and Polkadot, kind of a comparison of the three. They differ in some interesting ways. Polkadot also, one of the things that gives me pause is they, and this is another sharp difference from Ethereum, but they're really embracing on-chain governance, whereas ETH currently and ETH with ETH 2.0 is strictly a social consensus, zero on-chain governance environment. Polkadot employs a lot of different governance layers. It gets complex where you have things like councils and stuff. And I think that adds, I applaud them for what they're trying to do. I like the spirit of maybe there's a place for on-chain governance, but I think it adds some risk because at some point, these are potential attack vectors and these are unproven mechanisms. So that's an interesting differentiator to keep an eye on with respect to Polkadot.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned several reports that you've worked on through this interview, and we have to start closing this. So where can people find your reports? What would you like them to do apart from just logging into ShapeShift? Just Google ShapeShift New Frontiers. We have a page that links to these various reports.
Your viewers can also follow me on Twitter, Seventh Wave. The T is a 7 in Seventh Wave. And also just following ShapeShift on Twitter. Whenever we put these out, we blast them out on social. And there should be another one or two coming down the pike relatively soon here. I appreciate you reading them because it's fun. Initially, I write these for internal use. Try to really give the organization a sense of where things are headed, and then we kind of take out some of the more strategic stuff, the internal stuff, and then at the end of the day, if this content is helping people make smarter decisions and understand the ecosystem better, then right on. Because at the end of the day, I just want to help people kind of make better, smarter decisions in terms of not only where they're putting their money, but like how is all this like shaping up? How is this all going to operate together?
No, and the PDFs, they look great. I mean, they're beautiful. So people should definitely check out the reports. They're well written. I mean, you write them. You have a very good way to explain things.
Design people working.
Yeah, like you have a great way to put down things in a simple way. So props for them. Everyone, I would say that should try and see if there's anything that they find of interest in there. There's also more about the NFTs, more about the metaverse in there. If you don't think I managed to cover these to their fullest in this conversation. And well, Kent, thank you very much, man. I'd really like to have you back here whenever there are new crazy use cases for NFTs to talk about them.
Hey, great chat, Carlos. Hey, happy to jump back on whenever you want.
Okay, cool, man. So if you don't have anything else to add, we can close this episode. Anything else?
Lastly, I would we've talked a lot about, these research areas or these new emerging topics. If there's one thing that I would want to encourage just everybody in crypto to do, it's just like, think with the mind of your own. Think for yourself, question authority, to use the old saying from Timothy Leary. I always repeat this, but like there are so many people in crypto that kind of, they want to tell you what to think. They're influencers. They're trying to pump their own bags. People are out there to create a certain sort of narrative, and they frequently have biases. So as you go out to seek information, be skeptical, be aware that people always have at least some sort of bias, but seek out sources that are more objective. Be very wary of hype. Second guess your own assumptions. At the same time, have an open mind. But there's nothing quite like doing your own research and developing your own view of what's happening. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important one is your own. And don't forget to have fun along the way.
There's definitely nothing better than trying to add to your point, which I 100% agree with. And there's also nothing better than learning about the technologies first and learning about the solutions there and sort of build your opinion from there. That's one of the reasons we don't talk about coin prices here, because it's just the easiest way to go into a number go up mentality that has hurt this industry a lot.
Yep, there's enough of that on TikTok and YouTube. So keep fighting the good fight with that.
I mean, we're on YouTube, so most people might be viewing this on YouTube right now. But yeah, like, don't go to the other channel, guys. Bad. Cool, man. Okay, well, go and follow Kent on Twitter. His handle is going to be here. It's a sort of a tough handle to remember, so it's going to be in the description box. You can click it, you can go follow him, go read the reports, go learn more about ShapeShift, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.